Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we're going to continue our look at painting Obsidian flesh. So this is part 2, and we're working on a Wilderkin model from the Relicblade game. This model, we're going to give him an Obsidian flesh tone, which basically is kind of like giving him kind of this translucency kind of look. We're going to bust out the Screamer Pink and Lamian Medium, and we're basically going to go around and reestablish some of the high points and the corners and edges of each of the little details. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, where we were shading the sections of the model, we're basically just going to reestablish some of the corners, some of the high points, clean up some edges, and just kind of really bring out the overall effect. And so again, when we initially laid out the first darker tone on this model, we pushed some of that Screamer Pink a bit darker than we wanted. And so now we're just simply going to come in and reestablish it. But we're going to keep some of those mid-tones that we created when we laid out those colors and feathered them back, so that we get a nice little transition going. And of course, this is the point where we're going to start to establish the highlights and define each of the little sections of muscle that we want to create. And as I mentioned previously, we are treating each of these little muscles like they are their own gemstone. So rather than trying to figure out how a gemstone would look across an entire model like this, we are just simply going to treat each section like they are a gemstone. So on the face here, I'm highlighting off to the right of his face, creating more highlights on his jaw, on the underside of his cheekbones, towards the tip of his nose, and just a little bit on his brows. Again, just to kind of bring out those details a little bit more. Now the face, it's not going to be quite like how we do the rest of the model as far as achieving this desired translucency, the appearance of translucency. We're taking a little bit more liberties there because, again, it's got all sorts of details, and we want to make sure that we retain the character of the model. So as you can see, we are simply just building this color up, reestablishing some high points, bringing more of the color down towards the bottom. In previous examples of painting gemstones, basically we always have the darker point at the top and then lighter down below. Now, of course, I made a slight boo-boo here. You'll see that I'm working with another highlight color, and that arm has already been highlighted. And basically what this is a 3-to-1 of Screamer Pink and Skull White, or White Scar, Skull White. And I'm just simply reestablishing these highlights. Again, you can see I'm working it towards the tip of the nose, the bottom of the cheekbone, and I'm trying to create more highlight to one side of his face. Again, because with gemstones, we often highlight to one angle, where often we build up the color towards, we create the little crescent shapes, kind of at the at the 7 o'clock or the 5 o'clock position. Well, you want to maintain that kind of theory as you are working your way around this model. So you don't want to have the highlights, straight down kind of thing. You want to have them off to the side a little bit. And again, as long as you are fairly proficient in how you usually tackle gemstones in that regards, you really shouldn't have too much trouble going for that effect on a surface like this. And of course, this doesn't have to be done just for this kind of model. You can do it on any kind of model once you kind of get the hang and the gist of how we kind of go about this. So with that color, you can see we've established more high points. We're going to take a little bit more White Scar, add it to our mixture, giving us a roughly 2-to-1. I'm going to use a little bit of Lamian Medium just to thin it out just a little bit. And we are again going to layer in another highlight. And again, with these highlights, we are simply just concentrating along the edges. And we want to bring those highlights downwards. And other areas, you can take a little bit of liberties, like, for example, that little muscle on it that comes up from his neck. I don't know what that muscle's called, but that highlight is downwards, but it's also kind of in the center. But again, like on the shoulder, we're bringing it down. The biceps, obviously, I want to bring more highlight to the outer portion of the bicep and the tricep area. On the forearm, similar thing, so that again, it's not just purely highlighting in kind of like a one direction kind of thing. It's kind of off to the side. So that's really the big one, is just keeping that kind of asymmetric kind of look to the whole thing. Here you can see on the face, again, I'm just highlighting just that one side of the jaw, just a little bit off to the lip, just on the one side of his nose, catching that nostril, that one cheekbone I'm just catching, and a bit on the brow, kind of in towards the center where he's kind of got his little furrow on his face. And I'm pretty happy with how that all kind of looks. Here on the legs, again, the legs, realistically, the legs, actually the underside and behind the knee would get the highlights. So So it's kind of artistic liberty I'm taking here, where I'm highlighting towards the kneecap rather than realistically it would be on the underside. You wouldn't really see those highlights actually if we were doing this, staying actual true to, doing a gemstone. So again, it's artistic liberties we can take here. Emperor's Champion or Children is next. This is straight out of the bottle, just the dampness of the brush to thin it out, and we're applying these highlights very, very minimally and very, very carefully. Again, just going for corners. And as we work our way around the model, I've said it many times that, this is really kind of a quick way I'm going about it. I'm not spending a whole lot of time creating transitions and blends and everything like that. I'm just kind of laying the groundwork for you if you want to give this a try, so you can do it really quickly like how I've done it here, or if you want to push it further and create those gradients and really work those color blends, by all means. And in fact, if you do go about creating something like this, definitely share those images with me, because I'd like to see what you guys have done. Again, you can see it's just simply coming in and hitting all those low points. And you can see, like on the pectoral, how we have the darker points up above and we have brighter points down below. And again, it's that impression of like a gemstone, and I'm treating each muscle group as a gemstone unto itself. So the shoulder, the bicep, the forearm, the face, the pectorals, the thighs, all of that. White Scar is next. Now, I'd start doing this because I was mostly happy with where I was at, and I'm beginning laying those spot highlights down. And I just basically lay a dot and then kind of do a little bit of a dash, kind of following the uppermost contour of each of those little sections, like we do with gemstones when we put those little dots representing the spot highlight or the reflective light on that surface, because it's a smooth surface. Now, in my usual case, I would probably apply a gloss varnish to this model just to finish off the glossy like look and the gemstone like look. And I may still do that because this is most likely going to be a gaming piece. And you can see on the brow, I just kept just on one side. I do a little dot and just a little dash. And again, it's just to create that impression of that gemstone. So I continue my way around the model. As you can see here, I did it on the thigh, the high point, building those white highlights right where it gets really, really dark. And this is kind of the imagined light sourcing above the model, creating that really bright highlight. But I wasn't 100% behind that, so I'm going to go in with some Emperor's Children with some White Scar. This is going to be roughly a 1-to-1 mix ratio. We're going to use just the dampness of the brush, just to thin this color out just a little bit. And I'm going to lay a few more highlights down. And in fact, if I was going to get really nitpicky, I probably would have turned this into a glaze and just kind of married some of these transitions together and push this transition a little bit more and really sell this kind of gemstone-like effect. It is really about the contrast. It's pushing that dark tone and pushing the bright tone. And of course, it's entirely up to you how far you want to push those tones, building at least to the dark points, going really almost to the black. Well, we did go to black, but if you really push those tones really dark, and no matter how deep you build your highlight tones, it will give that somewhat convincing effect of like a gemstone. And again, this is like an Obsidian. I mentioned previously that I wasn't really happy with the way it was looking initially, where I basically did it like it was black and grays, and it just was not very cool. And I'm much happier with this kind of look here. So we put those final highlights in, and I'm definitely liking it. We could even lay a little bit more. We could almost build that up almost to a pure white as far as those highlights are concerned on those areas. We're going to come in with some Saish purple. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to apply this over where we hit the areas with that pure white. I want to push these white highlights down a bit. They're just a little too stark for me, and it just kind of, it just really wasn't working for me. And so I'm just pushing them down a bit with the Saish purple so that they're not so darn bright. Again, like I said, for me personally, I would probably hit this with a gloss varnish, and I still may, to create the illusion of it being a gemstone or a glass-like surface, or what have you. But again, once I hit it with the Saish purple and it knocks that white down just a bit, you can still see the stark spot highlights on the areas, but it's pushed back a bit. And I actually prefer the look a lot more if I'm going to leave it as a matte on that surface. As you can see there, you can still see the little spot highlights, but they're not as prominent, and it's kind of not so speckly looking on the model. And so I'm much happier with that. And so that is Obsidian Flesh, and this is the highlight. This was part 2. again, we're going to continue on with this model. So this is another adventure we're on here. This is a Wilderkin model. It's this Battleborn Stonekin from Relicblade. Really fun miniature game. These are metal models. Huge thank you to all my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below, and it will take you off to Patreon. And there's varying tiers to support at. So a huge thank you to everybody who does support and everybody who is considering supporting. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.